This is IGN. This meta remake revisits a controversial classic with a modern twist. This is your IGN review of Faces of Death by Eric Goldman. It might seem odd to describe a remake of Faces of Death as fun, and yet somehow that's the case. That's not to say it's just fun, though. There are some interesting layers and a commendable amount of modern relevance included in this new take on an infamous title. In the space between people who've actually seen 1978's Faces of Death and the many people who have not, are those who have simply heard of it at some point, and they fall into two categories. The ones who've heard it's a horrific movie filled with actual on-screen deaths, and those who've heard it's a movie that claimed to be filled with actual on-screen deaths, but in fact faked them. Faces of Death 2026 takes on the innate challenge of how one would even attempt to remake a shock value faux documentary from nearly 50 years ago, and embraces that challenge with a very clever new approach that's indebted to what came before without feeling like a retread. Filmmakers Daniel Goldhaber and Issa Matze, co-writers on the film with Goldhaber directing, spin a story around Margot, played by Barbie Ferreira, who works in content moderation for a video-based social media app. The trailers have revealed the film's most meta aspect, which is that in Faces of Death 2026, Faces of Death 1978 exists as a movie, and yes, that casts a shadow over what's occurring in the present. Interestingly, Goldhaber and Matze do such a good job of giving us a funhouse mirror take on the original film's concept, even before the original movie is directly mentioned, that this version probably could have still worked just fine without this extra layer. At the same time, the original film is incorporated in a cool way and does allow for some additional freaky parallels to play out. It's impossible to do an openly meta horror movie these days and not think of Scream, but Faces of Death doesn't feel like a Scream retread. It's not based around a killer obsessed with horror movies, but rather one who wants to make a splash in a particular way that could only exist in the social media age, with Faces of Death simply serving as their conduit. That being said, there is one mini dialogue that is a bit more Scream-coded, but it's justified in the narrative. And if you must make the comparison, it's worth noting that Faces of Death includes a much better, more focused commentary on our current culture than Scream 7 did, making up for an element that the recent sequel lacked. Though mostly played straight, Faces of Death has a wicked sense of humor that's used in a commendable manner. It's not overplayed, but always lurking under the surface, and it provides some of that aforementioned twisted fun. This is especially true in regards to how Arthur, played by Dr. Montgomery, perceives himself and his image. As a product of the internet age, Arthur is capable of being as much of a keyboard warrior as anyone else. He just also happens to be an actual psychopathic killer. And yes, the movie delivers on the gory side of things in some suitably twisted ways for a film bearing this title. The question of how and why you would even attempt to remake Faces of Death is given a compelling answer in this new remake. Using a postmodern meta take on both the original film and how it was perceived, the movie reflects a world where, rather than hunting down a specific VHS tape to see people supposedly really die, you can now find exactly that type of content immediately by simply going on the internet, and that is far from a comforting thought. Faces of Death's IGN score? A surprising 8 out of 10. Thanks for listening to IGN. My name is Tony Jackson, and for the latest updates on Faces of Death, visit us at IGN.com.
Spoken Layer.